Course means we're joined by our marketing maestro, the man with the big brain, Stephen Barnes. That's a good intro on Friday.
Yeah. Can't complain about that. Big brains, big muscles, big hearts,
Big bank
empathy.
balance, big bank balance.
Well, trying, but I don't know about that. It's not about the money, it's about the art.
Yes, said nobody ever. So, tell me, how's your week been?
Well, I saw you on Monday, right? Or we spoke on Monday at least.
Correct.
And I actually, truth be known, this week my feet haven't touched the floor. It's unbelievable.
Good.
Unbelievable.
So Chinese.
Yeah, we've had a series of big holidays, in a very truncated space of time. Christmas, New Year, Chinese New Year, and Hong Kong tends to go quiet during the big holiday time. So we've had so many holidays in the space of 6-8 weeks, really. What happens in immigration is that the demand for the service doesn't go away. It's always there. It just doesn't get action during the holidays because people don't want to start dealing with immigration paperwork, when there's Christmas turkey to eat and, licee to pass around at Chinese New Year.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, once the holidays are out of the way, then all that pent-up demand just comes back and, literally, probably seven to 10 new clients every single day at the moment. And that's a lot of volume. It's a lot of volume for a 25-person practice like ours.
And is a lot of that being driven by your content on the internet or referrals? Actually, that's a question for you. What would you say your percentage of new business comes from referrals from existing clients or from your huge presence on the web?
Well, that's a tough one, right? Because these days what happens is that even if there's a referral, normally they will check us out on the website first so they know, kind of what we're all about before we have a conversation. Pure source business, where people have gone, I've got an immigration problem, let's type something into Google and, see what's out there. I'd say probably 30-40% of our volume. And then the rest comes from word of mouth referrals. But it's, as I say, it's a big amorphous blob at the end of the day because, it isn't exactly clear cut where all of our business origins from. When I ask clients in conference, and I do, frequently, it's always a mixed bag of, I'd heard about you 2 years ago. I actually saw your blog, and then this problem came up, and I spoke to my friend over dinner, and they said that they'd used you, and then it reminded me that this is where I needed to go. So, here I am, type of stuff.
Okay.
So it comes from left, right, and centre, which is a nice segue, sir. I don't know whether you intended it to be in that fashion, but today I'd like to talk about mapping the knowledge graph.
Okay.
Okay, so at this point, Mr. Black, you're supposed to say, well, sir, what do you mean by mapping the knowledge graph?
Okay, so what do you mean by mapping the knowledge graph?
Okay, so mapping the knowledge graph essentially speaks to this idea that whether it's today, whether it's 5 years from now, or it's 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, when somebody's looking for information or the path to a solution to a problem that they might have, they will begin their search in the big Google box. I mean, there are other search engines as well, but for all practical purposes, let's just assume it's the Google box. So when you map the knowledge graph, what you're doing is you're anticipating that people are going to start looking for information on the subject matter that you're an expert in. And then if you produce content on the web that anticipates the kind of questions that people are going to be asking, and then deliver the answers through your content proposition, so that when those questions do get asked, you're going to be the party that comes up with the answer to the question. Then if you can understand the totality of your niche, if you can put together a conceptual framework of the vernacular of the niche and all of the ideas in the niche and all the concepts in the niche, and then categorize all of the concepts and then tag all the other aspects of the niche that don't represent categorization of the material, but just are a descriptive appendage to material that has sort of, universality or connections in common with other concepts within the niche. That's what tags are all about. So if you're able to define your taxonomy, writing it down, understanding the categorization, understanding the tags that prevail when you've articulated that niche from a vernacular perspective, then you will be able to anticipate the kind of questions that people will ask. So if you anticipate what those questions are, you can then construct answers using content, and then you publish those questions and those answers using a technology platform like WordPress that allows you to define the taxonomy and allows you to ascribe categories and tags to that vernacular. And then you publish, and if you publish over time, what happens is that all the potential questions and all the potential answers that anybody could ever, ask or seek in relation to the problems that they have or the solutions that they're looking for, then there's a very good prospect that when those searches occur, you will be right up there, at the top of the tree, because Google's mission is to provide the highest quality content and the best possible answers to all the queries that people ever make on their platform. So you can define your niche and use your expertise and identify the questions that could possibly be asked and then produce answers to them in a content format. And at the same time, when you're delivering the answers, you do it in a sort of a remarkable purple cow way, as we've discussed previously. Then you can go on over time to map the knowledge graph. So that in essence, in the future, anybody ever asks a question in your niche via the Google box, you're going to appear, and that way you dominate search. Okay. So this is a dimension to the connection economy that people don't readily understand. They get their heads stuck in this concept of SEO, and then they imagine people with propellers in their heads doing all kinds of weird and wonderful things at the back end using code and sort of ways to game an algorithm and complex mathematical sort of notions like that. But actually, that's not what's going on. There's a role for technical SEO, but that's not what's going on in my niche and in other expert niches where you're really providing a professional service. What you're doing is you're anticipating the total vernacular, and then you're answering questions in that vernacular.
All right, because I don't have the benefit of a formal education, as we've always said, let's see if we can do this by example. For example, say you had a travel business and your niche was overseas guests coming and making use of your travel service to go and visit game lodges or anything in Southern Africa, for example. How would you then develop a content proposition around that and then map the knowledge graph?
So then what I do first is I say to myself, what are the top 100 questions that anybody could ever ask about this material that you're going to start preparing, so that you can get yourself en route to being first found by Google. So what are the top 100 questions? So for the exercise of writing those top 100 questions and producing answers for it, you then essentially lay out the sort of basic parameters of that niche. And then you identify all other related information that would naturally flow from those top 100 questions that somebody might potentially go, oh yeah, I've got the answer to that question. Okay, but that stimulates another question, right? And so you then understand what that other question is, and you get to a point where once you have kind of asked all of those questions and thought about it in that frame of reference, for all practical purposes, you've defined the outside edges of your niche. And at that point, you can then focus your entire content proposition around answering questions, B helping to solve problems, C surfacing information, and then basically putting down everything else that you think is probably going to add value in relation to that particular niche, understanding the kind of things that people are interested in. So it's been driven by the sort of the top 100 questions, and then organically you spoil it out of that, and then impacting on that, of course, will be all of your knowledge of that niche, because you're obviously in that business, game parks in South Africa. So there could be a gazillion other things that you might want to, write about and to make, interesting. And it could be, security and safety on safari. What was the history of, let's say, no longer killing these animals, but taking photographs of them. Just the kind of stuff that is naturally within your purview, that you can then build a sort of content platform around, so that in the future, over 5, 6, 7 years, you publish 3-4 times a week, you're going to produce a very high quality, voluminous content platform. And that's going to then become a sink on the internet that Google has begun to recognize over time is the go-to place for that very information on that niche. Now, there's a lot of other people that would be producing sort of similar content to that. But what I've come to understand is that the majority of businesses, they have a website and they understand the importance of having a public-facing proposition that articulates what they're all about. But they haven't been scientific about understanding dominating the niche. And by defining your taxonomy and mapping the knowledge graph and continuing to publish over time, answering questions and solving problems, providing information that adds value to people that have got an interest in that niche, over time you have such a voluminous content proposition that your competition starts to fall away as you start to pull traffic away from them. They think to themselves, well, we can't really compete with this, and B, because you've got so much content there, 10 or 15 years down the line, you'll have put this huge presence of content and answers and the kind of the Wikipedia of your niche onto the web, and Google will just say, right, this is the go-to place. There's no better content on the internet than what these guys have proven to put out over the years, and so they should give you top rankings, and that way you begin to steal the marketplace.
Okay, now my own habits when it comes to the internet is if I see that I ask Google a question and I'm looking for a variety of different answers, I will avoid going to the same website because I would like to find a different opinion or something like that. Now, do you have a variety of websites that answer the questions asked so people don't think that they are hitting the same place?
Well, as it happens, we do, but they are all it's all copy content syndicated over to our other websites, because we have a number of websites, but in the Hong Kong immigration space, we have 3. So I publish on one, and then that piece of content then gets published on the other 2. But the other 2 have got a slightly different orientation. They've got a slightly different look and feel. The material's the same, but the look and feel is different. But that's not important. What's ultimately important, I find, is that when you're establishing your content proposition, the first thing you do is you look to see what your content competitors are all about. And then you can see exactly what their content proposition is. So if you know that you can publish content that's essentially 10 times better than them, and you can continue to publish content on an ongoing basis, then the quality of the content pool that you develop should be so compelling and so remarkable that people will not want to click off, because they've been so overwhelmed by the generosity that's inherent in your websites, where you've positioned your expertise and it's clear that you've done something that would mean that you don't really have to go anywhere else to look for this stuff. If you do go looking for stuff elsewhere, which a lot of people do, then what will happen is that the rather than it just comparing one piece of content and what they're saying to another piece of content, what you tend to do is you tend to look at the quality of the experience that you're having. So if you've committed to a content proposition like, say, we've done at the Hong Kong Visa Centre, we know that when people naturally want to click off our website to go and check what else is out there, we know that what they're going to encounter is pitiful, so we're going to win. So the mission is to have 10 times content.
Okay. And now I know you have a video production studio. How would you say the way that people make use of content has changed? Do people prefer to watch, or do they still enjoy a read?
Well, people like to consume content in different ways, but bearing in mind that the cost of producing mere text content is marginally zero, yet the cost of producing video content, believe it or not, is not that much more expensive, all things considered, but it's perceived to be technically challenging, and it's perceived by the people, the authors of the content, that perhaps a bit scared to go in front of the video or whatever. What I've come to understand is that, and has been proven successful to us, is that people want the quickest possible answers. They want to get to the salient part of what's brought them to your website in the first place. They don't want to have to be scouting around trying to figure out what the answer is. They want to be able to know basically at a glance what link to click. That's going to contain the answer to the question. And if the video is a minute or a minute and a half or 2 minutes long, people will consume that to the end. So you're going to produce video content, in my experience, that basically answers questions and gets to the heart of the reason why people have come on your website in the first place, and make it really easy for them just to be able to understand what they should be clicking to get the information that they need. And the beauty about video is that gives you content creation possibilities that doesn't exist if you're just going to go with flat text and stock photographs and the like. With video, as you gain more experience with it, or you've got an orientation towards making videos interesting, there's so many sort of things you can do to bring them alive and make it an enjoyable experience while you're educating the punter at the same time.
Now I'm going to ask you a bit of a left of field question here. When you look at valuing a business, you would look at the books, you would have a look if there was any intellectual property. How would you value a business that has a great deal of content on the internet as part of its IP?
Well, that's a great question, right? And what you will do is, as a variety of different valuation mechanisms, is you'll look to see historically what sort of revenue has that content yielded, what level of competition do you have that makes the barriers to entry against your content proposition germane to basically a pseudo, if not an actual monopoly position over time, and that then impacts on the actual multiples that you'll get from your profitability or your revenues that have been generated through that content proposition. Those are typical valuation mechanisms that are used, recognizing that a content platform is an annuity that just keeps on giving and giving and giving and giving and giving. So, having said that, I'll give you an example of an actual valuation for a business that's similar to ours in many ways, although we haven't sold the company for this quantum. But 2 years ago, the New York Times bought two websites, but they were aligned with each other, and each of these websites had only 1,000 pieces of content on them, and these websites were very simple. What they did was that they took the number 1 and number 2 consumer product from Which magazine. They then sent that product out. They bought that product and they gave it to a reviewer for 6 weeks, who reviewed the product for 6 weeks and then wrote up the experience that they had on that product. And then they put all that content on the internet for free, with Amazon links to both of those 2 products, so that when people were searching for a review on a particular, say, camera, they'd find their way onto that website. There would be two items on that page. One is product A, one is product B, and then you read the entire opinions, and then you make a decision which one should you buy, A or B. And the way that they made the money out of it was by being Amazon affiliates. So you've read the article, you know what you want to buy, you're going to buy it through Amazon, you click their link, and then they get a commission out of it. So two websites, very similar to ours, based on the WordPress platform, as I understand it, identical to ours. New York Times bought those 2 websites for $30 million US.
Because of the number of hits that they had, and they saw the potential of using the platform to market product?
Well, when you look at when you look at what they were doing, right, there was obviously the revenues that they were generating from it, which was, that was all good. there was inherent in the value was the prospect of it being, potentially a monopoly site over time. But in this instance, also because the New York Times bought it, they were obviously looking for ways to, get into the connection economy and do something that, allows them to leverage what they're really good at, which is to command audiences, typically for news, and add value in new and interesting ways. So in the connection economy there, the takeaway is, how do you value things? Well, you normally value things from the perspective of the party that's doing the buying. They've got all the reasons that they have for wanting to buy that, and the party X versus party Y may have different motivations for buying them and plans for them. And depending on what those motivations and those plans are, the valuation could be the difference between 30 million US and 100 million US. It just depends. So this is another sort of fundamental dynamic of the connection economy. If you're going to develop a content platform, if you're answering questions and helping to solve problems, you've got the genesis of creating relationships with people. And once you've created those relationships, you might be able to sell them more stuff. And selling them more stuff could be of interest, as we saw with the New York Times, for example, to an acquirer that would then impact positively on the valuation too. So there's no doubt about it that, making a commitment to produce content and map the knowledge graph, produce 10 times content, sell services or other things on the back end is going to end up with a huge pool of content that will dominate the vernacular in that particular niche. And over the horizon, there could be somebody coming along with a big fat check wanting to take it off you. Thank you very much.
One of the things that I found very irritating, especially on blogs, is where they in my opinion, where they cheapen the brand that they have by allowing others to advertise on their platform. You don't do any other advertising on yours. Which way would you say is a better way to go? People are not interested in advertising. Okay, you got to understand that today, I think 80% of all new online advertising spend goes to Google or Facebook. So there are very, very few platforms on the web today that can generally and genuinely command decent advertising rates because of that particular content that you've got. I've never believed that our content platform should be a vehicle basically to sell advertising. Our content platform has always been designed to attract people who have questions that need answering and problems that need solving, and we want to use our content proposition in a purple cow way to create relationships and disaggregate, reaggregate value, and then ultimately sell services. So strategically in the connection economy, I think advertising is just pollution ultimately. Why would you want to dilute the quality of your message by allowing some third party, possibly unrelated to what you're all about, to sort of get in the way? I mean, if you're having a business meeting with somebody in a conference room, and you just happen to bring in someone that observing the proceedings, sitting right next to you, you wouldn't let him every 10 minutes just chirp up and say, "Oh, by the way, did you know that you can get this from me? Okay, I'll let you get back to Stephen now." I mean, you don't have those interruptions in the real world don't happen. So for me, I've always eschewed advertising and never thought that it was ever worthwhile. Even our video content, we in the main we don't have any advertisements that run against content. We just want to educate people and help them achieve their goals and objectives, which brought them to our websites in the first place. And would you say that dominating the internet with your content is a surefire way of getting to a monopoly?
Well, that's proven to be the case for us, and I've got an entire new, line of material called intelligent content marketing that's designed to sort of propagate that. So it's my opinion that if you do it right and you do it before everybody else and you understand disruptive innovation, there's no reason whatsoever why, after you've published over X amount of time and you've created new relationships and Google have given you all the credit for being the go-to place on the web to get the best information on that particular material, that you can't get a monopoly over time.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephen. I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic weekend and you're good to catch up again next Friday.
You betcha, mate. I won't sleep between now and then. You know how excited I am about these Friday afternoon talks.
Have a good one. We'll chat soon.